because you guys may want to look back at this. Duh. So yes, you're going to want to control all of those variables. So if you take Tylenol and it works one day, it has to be repeatable. You have to be able to do it every day and go, well, okay, that worked. But you can't try 5 things and then attribute it to the peppermint oil. That doesn't make any sense, right? All right, and then that's probably Jackie's other students, which is fine. Yeah, they're coming. I don't know. So what is science? We move on to what is science and hypotheses. So what's a hypothesis? It's an idea that can be tested, right? Right. And then your hypothesis is, as we said, either accepted or rejected. Now, we don't want to say true or not true because that is not the best descriptor. We like rejected or accepted. So if you took the Tylenol and your headache went away and you did it every day for, what do you want? And you did it. No, it's upstairs. She's got it upstairs in schoolroom. Same as always, honey. Okay. So you do it every day for a week. You could say, okay, my hypothesis that Tylenol will make my headache go away is accepted. Ta-da! Right? That's how it works. And then you must be able to repeat it. Now, this is the one I want you to nail in. And I think, I'm going to tell you, Alex, before I click them, but I think my little graphics were backwards. And I didn't notice it at first. So your scientific theory and your scientific law. What does your scientific law tell you? What happens, right? And your scientific theory tells you why it happens. Yeah, see, these were backwards. And I don't know why, but I'm going to fix them before I put that in your folder to keep, because that's annoying. I don't even know why I did that. So what and why? So what's a good example? Who has an example of a law and a theory? Does anybody have one at the top of their head? I'll give you the one that comes up in biology probably most, well, at least most frequently with people who don't get the difference between theory and law. All right, so,
Law of motion.
Okay, there's one. All right. There you go. Now you'll start shouting out Newton's laws at me. So a scientific theory versus a scientific law. All right, now something we can see happening. It's a fact. That's a what, right? So you can observe evolution occurring because it occurs within a species based on environmental causes. So we will actually study in a lab later this year. We will discuss the fact that, this is a fact, that in Britain, around the time of the Industrial Revolution, there was a particular breed of moth that was a particular color, and then the environment changed due to the behaviors of the humans around it. And the population of those moths evolved to the point where they were almost all entirely a different color. That's evolution. You can see it occur. You can see the change over time. Now, your theory, what?
And I'm pretty sure since then those moths have actually changed back.
They have. Yep. Now, your theory, hey, sorry, I haven't seen her forever. So, yeah. What are you doing, Drew? Oh, yeah. Yes. Cole and Michael, can you help real quick? Sorry. And Jackie, if you look in the closet, hola. Jackie,
yes.
If you look in the closet in the guest room, the markers are up there. I didn't pull them out yet.
In the guest room?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is Jason just not leaving the schoolroom?
Oh, no. I need a whiteboard.
Oh, yeah.
People need to write.
That works.
We moved on.
Do it.
From conversation.
That'll work. Awesome. Thank you. So anyway, that's evolution. You can actually see the change. So you know the change has occurred. It's not a theory. It's not a, well, maybe this happened. You saw it. The theory about how that happened or why that happened is the theory of natural selection, which was what Darwin posited years back. And it's pretty cool, actually. And it makes sense and it applies. And that's how theories work with laws. You go, okay, that explains why we're seeing that. So be sure that you understand that, because there are some people who will try and tell you that something that's a theory is a law. Well, that's just the way it is, because clearly, you know, that happened. Well, and then they'll also tell you laws that are theories. So bias, what's a bias? Anybody know what a bias is?
Science or like in general?
In either.
In general, like
you favor towards it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say in an argument, if you're arguing against someone, your point's gonna be favored because you're arguing it.
Mm-hmm. It's very good. Does anybody else have an example or a bias? So we all have bias. It's internalized. It is what it is. It's just something to recognize. It's what you, and there's internal bias too, which you believe to be true. It's what you believe to be true. And we all have that, right? I believe homeschooling to be the best form of education for my children. I definitely have a bias in that direction, right? My sister-in-law is a public school teacher. She probably has a bias in the other direction, right? But bias comes up, as Dylan said, in arguments sometimes, and it also comes up in science. And in science, the way it comes up is very often somebody will want to prove something. And then that person will try and conduct an experiment looking for this particular result. What? Oh, they'll be aiming for that result, which means they may not conduct their experiment in a very controlled manner. They may alter things along the way to get the result they want. And it's not something, it's not something that you necessarily even recognize that you're doing. It just happens. So it's important to recognize that when you're conducting an experiment, all those pre-lab questions, what might you see? Those questions, yeah, you can get that can be, your bias can impact those because now you've thought about it. So now you're looking for a certain result and that may not be what you're actually getting. So yeah, I like that. It's blindfolded. Yes and no. Good image. So life science, this is biology. This is what we're doing this year. You're going to do a lot of Greek and Latin roots, prefixes, suffixes. You're going to see them a lot. Biology is a perfect word. Ology is the study of something, right? Archaeology, paleontology,
Podology.
immunology,
astrology.
yeah, astrology. So if ology is the study of something, what's bio? Life, study of life, biology, easy to remember. So our big concepts here in biology, that living things are made of cells. Now you saw that today. You saw two different types of living things. You saw little unicellular organisms, and then you saw some multicellular organisms, but all living things are made of cells. Now, at the beginning of this pandemic, I heard people using the words like the viral cells this and the viral cells that, and I wanted to strangle people. So viruses are not the same as other types of infectious organisms. They're actually more like little DNA fragments and strands, which we'll talk about much later this year. But it's different than a bacteria, which is a whole cell, right? And DNA carries a universal genetic code for living things. So your DNA, which we learned about briefly last year in chemistry, is what's going to code for every protein created in an organism. So even the tiny, tiny, tiny little bacterial cells that we looked at today are packed full of DNA. So all living things grow and develop, and then also reproduce. This is how we classify living things. They're made of cells, they have DNA, they grow and develop, they reproduce. For a lot of living things, this is pretty much their only purpose, is reproducing. You see it a lot. Things in nature, weeds, that's a great one. And most animals are driven highly by reproduction, right? Where they live, what they do, how they look. Earlier, who was it? Oh, it was in the earlier group. We talked about, we had a tarantula and they have hair, but we know it can't be hair because only mammals have hair. So what's the purpose of those? And one of the suggestions that came up was, well, maybe it's, you know, to attract a mate. Because you'll see that a lot, especially when you think about peacocks and peahens. Nobody even talks about peahens. Yeah, exactly. It's the female peafowl, which they're not all peacocks. It's the female peafowl, and they're not exciting to look at all. It's the peacocks that are fancy because they're like, woo, look at me, ladies, right? So other concepts in biology is that taken as a group, living things evolve, branching from common ancestors, and form is a reflection of function. So think about that. Form is a reflection of function. We'll probably talk some about like analogous features. Think about like the structure of if you look at the bone structure, for example, of a whale fin versus a bat wing versus a human arm, you'll find certain similarities and then differences that are particular to the function of the organism. And metabolism is the process by which living things turn matter into energy. So if you have a slow metabolism, people will say that I have a slow metabolism, I can't lose weight. People who have a high metabolism need a lot of food. You ever seen these people? Like they've got a super high metabolism. Like Drew's godfather is like 6'5" and cannot put on weight. He can't, it doesn't matter what you feed the man. He's like a rail and always has been. Super high metabolism. And then also homeostasis, which we'll talk about some too this year, is the tendency for equilibrium. Okay, you guys probably know equilibrium from chemistry. If you weren't in chemistry, maybe you don't know. Can somebody kind of define what equilibrium is? Like in general, what's equilibrium? You know?
Equilibrium is the state in between two states.
Yeah, it's like a
It's
balance,
not-
right?
It's not one or the other.
All right, so has anybody ever seen the old trick of, and this is not a lovely trick, but the old trick of putting salt on a slug?
Yep.
Anybody ever seen that?
Yeah.
What happens to the slug?
It dies.
Okay, why does the salt kill it?
It dries it out.
Yeah, so here's how that works. So you got osmosis, which is water moving either way through a cell membrane. That's what it does. All right, water moves in and out of cell membranes all the time. That's the osmotic process. So you're trying to get a balance, okay? And your balance in this case is you've got a certain amount of sodium inside that organism, because organisms have sodium in them. You do, we all do. That's why when you get if you ever go to a hospital and you get an IV, they don't just stick water in you, it's saline, right? It's salt water. Okay, so there's a certain amount of sodium inside that slug, and then you put a lot of sodium outside that slug. So the water moves to balance the sodium so that your concentration of sodium water is equal on both sides. But it moves so much water out of the slug that the slug dries up and dies, right? Now, what?
IVs aren't fun.
They can be, because they can make you feel so much better. But most of the time, they're not.
Yeah, I do not like having IVs.
So here's one for you. This is kind of yucky, but it's it explains it perfectly. So if you've ever had, well, you probably haven't, maybe your grandparents or parents have. If you've ever had to have a procedure where they want, the medical procedure, where they want to like totally clear out your intestines, like they're going to do a colonoscopy or something. You've heard of people getting these procedures, right?
Yeah.
They have you drink a little thing of liquid that sometimes they call liquid lightning, because it will empty your body out. I mean, empty your body out in the most violent fashion possible. If you think you've ever been sick, you have not seen sick until you take this stuff. But it's a type of salt and water. And when you drink it, the salt concentration in your intestines goes way high. So what does your body do? It brings water into your intestines. So then what does that cause you to do? Spend your afternoon in the bathroom, and there's your osmotic process, because your intestines are just trying to accomplish homeostasis. That's their job. They don't know why you've put so much sodium in there, or potassium, or whatever they've given you. They don't know, but that's how that works. So these right here, this is what biologists often refer to as schnapps. All right, so it's, who wants to tell me? This one is
Carbon,
carbon.
nitrogen, oxygen,
Oh.
phosphorus, or potassium.
Yeah, phosphorus.
Sulfur.
And sulfur. Okay, these are the most common elements in living things. Of all organisms on Earth, they are almost all composed of pretty much these things. And they're very similar on a molecular level. So even the most diverse, different seeming organisms are very similar molecularly. So when I'm talking about different organisms, I'm talking about all kinds of different organisms. Anybody recognize anything? Wonder what the heck something is?
What's the middle thing?
I want to say that bottom right flower thing is that really, really, really stinky flower.
It is. Yeah. So yeah, we have all kinds of interesting things
I see a
here.
water bear.
Yeah, try to create a water bear. So the thing under what? Okay, I'm trying to remember what it was called because I put it in here. It's a Naya. That's it. Yeah, Naya. Is it Naya? Yeah, Aye. That's right. I couldn't remember what it was called. And does anybody know what this cute one is?
Koala.
Close.
Wombat.
It's called a quokka. They're freaking adorable. They're like the most photogenic creatures. Every time you take a picture of them, they're always smiling. People take pictures of them eating. They look like, hey, I got a leaf. I mean, they always just look adorable. Quokkas, eyes. Yes, this is that rotten flesh smelling awful, blooms for a day and stinks to high heaven plant. This one is, it looks like snapdragon, but I think it's lupine. And we got a beetle over here. We got some, I'm not even sure what algae that is. More here.
Water bear.
A little gecko. Yeah, water bear. I tried to grade.
Water
And then the
fish.
macaw and the blobfish, the cute little blobfish, right?
And grapes and a
So,
toadstool.
yeah, and grapes and the toadstool, right? So all these things on a molecular level,
I believe the water bear is the most endurable creature.
they are tough and they're
They can survive
cute.
20 years in space.
Yeah, they can survive in space.
Isn't that fascinating? I
That'll be
mean,
what's living
for real.
on our winter.
that is pretty darn fascinating. All right, so additional concepts. Interdependence exists in nature. So interdependence means that within a particular community of organisms, certain things are depending on other things. So if you take the grass away, because that's kind of at the bottom here, if you take that grass away, you're going to have major problems all the way up into your food web and into your community in general. Because if your grasshoppers can't eat, then your birds can't eat, then your foxes can't eat, and it affects everything. Now, if you take the mountain lion away, you're going to have more of its prey running amok, right?
The
So,
deer, what are those, groundhogs?
I think those are ground dog. No, I think the prairie dogs actually.
And the squirrels will increase rapidly.
Exactly. And what's this guy do?
Carrying eats dead stuff.
So, sorry, behind our church, there's this random, it was like a shed. It used to be a house, like a farm, the property did, and Drew found this and he came freaking out during their piano lessons. Cole was in a lesson, came running into church, like, well, I found something, I don't know what it is. He said, it looks like a monkey, but it's not a monkey, and I don't know. And he grabbed his phone and ran back out. A minute later, he said, you have to come. I go out there and look, and it's turkey vultures, 2 baby turkey vultures that were kind of curled up in the back, because turkey vultures will lay their eggs in structures and they'll raise their young in structures. And they're kind of in the corner and they're like, they have that fuzz, no feathers yet.
It's so pretty fun.
Is it? Okay, then you're good. You can step right over there. Perfect. You can just step out. You don't have to tell me. You can just run. By the way, those are killer shoes. Are those Doc Martens?
Yeah.
I knew it. All right, so cool. So anyway, you're gonna get a certain amount of interdependence. And what happens if your vultures are gone?
Lots of dead bodies.
Yeah, eventually bacteria, certain insects will get to it. You ever seen yellow jackets eat something? Because they will. Yellow jackets will destroy. I had a little snake, like a little garden snake kind of thing, die in my yard, and I watched, go for it. And I watched like every day, and it was yellow jackets eating it, and they ate it down to skeleton in like 3 days. It was crazy. A dead what? Bird. Oh yeah, they'll totally eat it. It's interesting.
People from Georgia Tech came all the way up.
Yeah, right? I know, right? All right.
Why are they going into backyards?
I don't know, man.
Kind of weird.
Eating snakes and birds. So the nature of matter is anything that has mass takes up space. Cool. So that everybody knows that definition, I hope. That's like a old school elementary school definition. Matter is anything that has mass, takes up space. And all matter is composed of atoms. And of course, atoms are composed of their subatomic particles, and there they are. And I will have to see if I can find it and I'll send it to you guys. But I saw a really interesting, it was like a TED Talk, but it wasn't a TED Talk. It was a guy giving a lecture on YouTube. And he was talking about subatomic particles and quantum mechanics. And it was the best explanation. Like, I can't explain it back because it's so complex, the argument he was making. But I could understand, like I'd have to watch it 3 or 4 times to be able to explain it back, but I could actually understand the argument he was making, which is pretty cool because most of the time quantum mechanics is like way up here for people. So the fact that he could bring it down to something very understandable, and it was fascinating. So nature of matter.
Binary, but it can also be both.
Well, this is what he was talking about. He was talking about, you know, we talk about how, you know, light is both particle and wave, and electrons, particle and wave, that he was saying it's a wave until you look at it and then it's a particle. So then he got into the whole Schrodinger's cat argument. And he's like, if you open the box, is the cat, he said, instead of dead or alive, he said asleep or awake. And if you observe it, you're observing it and it's awake. So what does observe mean? Does observe mean that you have to look at it with your eyes? Do you have to be conscious? Can the cat observe itself? Like all these questions. It was really, it's a thinker's discussion, but it was really fascinating to just kind of try and follow it. So isotopes, just briefly, those contain a different number of neurons. We deal with these a lot when you're dealing with like nuclear energy and all this kind of business. Also using it to date fossils. And then 2 or more elements combined form a compound. We've talked about this a lot in chemistry. And if you haven't had chemistry, so if you stick 2 elements together and they're different elements, then you have formed a compound. And they always combine in same proportion, right? We have law of definite proportions. If you have H2O, then you know you got your 2 H's and your 1 O. It's never going to be 3 H's and an O. That doesn't work, right? It's always the same. So we had ionic bonds, which is when we'll compare ionic and covalent. What's the difference? Who can tell me? Who remembers? This one's an easier one.
Covalent, one or two? Oh,
Yeah.
Ionic bonds form ions and covalent bonds. Another.
Ionic bonds form from ions,
Sorry.
and then covalent bonds are sharing an electron. So this has to do with whether or not an atom has lost an electron or gained an electron, and that will allow it to combine with another one. This isn't chemistry, so we're not going to spend nearly as much time on this year as we did in the past. But it's important. I know important to know that there are different kinds of bonds in nature because it will apply, especially when you get down into like metabolic processes and things like that. Some of that's very chemically, well, it's all chemically driven. So water is absolutely essential for life, and it's absolutely essential for the way everything functions on Earth. So there's all the different properties of water that make it particularly unique. The fact that it's polar, that means one end of the molecule is more positive and the other end is more negative. That allows it to create the particular structure that it creates. The fact that it has a high heat capacity. It takes a long time to boil a pot of water. You ever stood there and watched one? It never boils. If you watch it, you just stare and stare and it's never going to boil, right? And then water has a particular density. When water freezes, it freezes, what part freezes first? The top, right? Versus the bottom. Okay, so if you had a pond full of water and that ice is also less dense once it freezes. All right, so the ice on top, because of the fact that it is polar, when the water molecules form a lattice to make ice, it expands, right? If you put something in the freezer and put water in the freezer in a container and the container is just the same size, it's going to explode because the water is going to get bigger. So the fact that your water is at when it's frozen is less dense and it floats to the top allows for the fish and stuff underneath to continue living, because if that didn't happen, it would freeze all the way down and those little guys at the bottom would all die.
On a related note.
Yeah.
That's why you never put a can of unopened
Oh, that's always fun.
fizzy drink into,
Like Dr. Pepper,
yes, like into the freezer. It will explode and freeze on the inside.
Yes, it will. Yes, it
that's why
will.
I wanna stick. But
If
it's
you've
Dr.
ever
Pepper,
I would not recommend doing it in your freezer because it makes a ridiculous mess. But in the winter, if you want to do a fun experiment, in the winter, if you know it's going to freeze overnight, take your can of Coke or Sprite, just a can, not a bottle, a can, because it's only sealed by that tiny little seal that you crack open with your fingers, not a lot of pressure, right? And put it outside, but put it in a box and then leave it overnight. And it will kaboom, because the water not only gets bigger, but all that gas is trapped. And when it expands, it will make like stalactites of Coke or whatever in the box. It's fun. Yeah.
I'll write a
That-
report on
I was
it.
going to say that is Jack's dream come true. Yes, Shannon.
I was just saying that my mom told me at some point, I don't know how old I was or anything, put my Coke in the freezer, please. And I don't think she understood at that point because it was like late at night or whatever.
Probably meant for 10 minutes and then
Yeah.
forgot. Yep.
And so I put it in there and I went to bed. And I remember it was like really early in the morning, maybe like 6 a.m., 5 a.m. I hear a crack and a pop in the freezer. And I like, yeah. And
A bomb
it-
going
it
off.
was
Yeah.
everywhere. Oh my goodness.
Terrible. So because water has surface tension, things can float on it. Because it has a lot of cohesion between the molecules, those are the hydrogen bonds between water molecules, you get stuff like capillary action where anybody ever had the doctor do the thing where they take that tiny little glass tube and they touch it to your finger and the blood goes right up? That's capillary action. And that's called a capillary tube. And that is because the water in the blood is adhering to itself and to the glass and it just sucks right up. And that's really important too, because without that, there would be certain biological functions that don't occur. And then of course, it's a good solvent, right? It's a really, really good solvent. You can it's the universal solvent, right? You can put almost anything in water as long as it is also polar and it will dissolve. And then also it exists in all three states of matter that it can exist on the planet relatively, in relatively decent amounts, right? We have a lot of frozen water and we have a lot of liquid water, but we have more gas than anything, right? The whole environment's full of water molecules. So these are all the same things we just went over. There they are. All right. So pH and buffers. So pH scale. This is when we talk about how basic or acidic something is. So this has to do with how much hydrogen or hydroxide is present, which we talked about last year. How many positive or negative little ionic compounds are floating about. So buffers are things that kind of level out the pH. So when you do a lot of biological experiments, you will use a buffer solution. And a buffer solution will help keep the pH from shifting too much within the experiment you're working on. It's particularly important when you're doing stuff with like DNA, anything that's like biomolecular, in which we will be doing some DNA this year where we will, I think there's a buffer involved in that, but we will be working with DNA this year that comes with this really fun kit where you get to find out who committed a crime based on, it's based on DNA from the scene versus samples you got from suspects. It will be super fun. I want to break it open
Is
right
Jack
now.
one of the suspects?
No, you are.
Oh, wait,
So
wait.
yes.
Is it gonna be like actual, like one of us is actually the
No,
killer?
it's all
Okay.
prepared.
I was like,
But it would be really cool if you
draw a
were.
card that says
Yeah.
you're the murderer, you're suspect too.
But we have an electrophoresis kit, so now we can do it. So carbon compounds. Carbon compounds are carbohydrates and lipids. These are the most common compounds on Earth. The most common in biology, all these carbon compounds. What are you talking to Bailey for? Wish you leave her alone. So you have carbohydrates and you have lipids, and carbohydrates, sugars are carbohydrates, and you need carbohydrates to function in life. And lipids are fats and things of that nature. And we'll talk more about them when we get to them. So we have naturally occurring compound or derivative of such compound. Carbohydrates have three particular elements that compose them. They're what? Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And they're always there, but they're in different quantities, different proportions, which makes one carbohydrate different from another carbohydrate. Most widespread organic substances. So when you talk about the word organic, it means carbohydrates, basically. It comes from living things. People will say, oh, I grow organic strawberries. Technically, all strawberries are organic. What they mean is they don't use any like lab created fertilizers. But in essence, if it is something that grows in nature, develops in nature, it is organic versus inorganic things, which would be like a lump of coal. That's carbon, but it was organic when it was a living thing. Now it's breaking down into mineral. Yes. Okay. Play a vital role in all life. All right. So here is lipids and why they're important. So we'll talk about this when we get down to cellular structure, but this is what you call a phospholipid bilayer. Now, lipids have these ends here. It's got this little end here and this little tail here. And when you turn them like this, you create a bilayer where you've got one, basically like one polarity here versus one here. And you create a membrane. Cell membranes are composed like this. This is exactly how cell membranes function.
They look like marbles on a pair of stilts.
That's a good idea. I never thought about that. Kind of do. So this particular structure has a lot of importance in your day-to-day physiological functioning, and you probably never think about it. But when we get to talking about cells and cellular transport, how cells move things in and out of themselves through and across their membranes, and this is what we're talking about. It's moving in and out of a structure like that. So any class of organic compounds that are fatty acids or their derivatives, or what we call lipids, they are non-polar and they are insoluble in water, but soluble in organic solvents. So like dissolves like. Remember, polar things dissolve polar things, non-polar things dissolve non-polar things.
Mike was asking, I had big breath spurt.
What?
Wait, what?
Mike was asking you for legs.
Oh, okay. Mike was out. Okay, he's still trying to make an analogy for what this looks like. So Mike was asking. That looks like a nutcracker to me, like the kind you do. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Oh.
So things like waxes, oils, fats, these are all things that are lipids. So nucleic acids, amino acids, and proteins. So nucleic acids are found in DNA. Do you remember what they are? Therefore, in DNA, there's a different.
Is it the TCG? Yeah.
Yeah, thymine. You also thymine,
Guanine.
guanine,
Guanine.
adenine, cytosine.
Cytosine.
There you go. There you go. And then uracil. Uracil is an RNA, not in DNA. Do you remember that? So if you look here, you got your two up here at the top. It shows you your types. Your thymine and your adenine always go together. They fit like puzzle pieces, and your cytosine and guanine always go together. These are your DNA bases. So when you've got DNA, you got one on one side, one on the other side. They click together like completing the rung of a ladder, and the whole thing twists. And the base pairs are always the same, except in RNA when your adenine goes away and your uracil comes in its place, right? And they code for these amino acids, and they come in triplets. So you get 3 base pairs together, and that is called a triplet. You put multiple triplets together and you get a codon, right? And then you get these codons, you put them together, they make genes. We talked about it a little bit last year. We'll talk about it more when we get towards DNA, but this is just sort of your overarching. So they're the building blocks of proteins. Every protein in your body is made of amino acids. Now, interestingly, when your body recognizes allergens, okay, your body recognizes allergens, what it recognizes is the protein. So say you are allergic, I'll pick on you, peanuts. It's the peanut man. So say you have a peanut issue. All right, if you have a peanut issue, your body's recognizing the proteins in the peanut and going, oh, and starting an immune response. So there are some people who are so allergic to so many things that their food has to get broken down into amino acids entirely. So they break it down into a formula, and it's only amino acids, no solid proteins. But when you consume it, your body will reconstruct the proteins inside. But there's nothing for your immune system to see coming in and go, oh, put the brakes on, that's bad. So there is a way to just start with amino acids from the very beginning. So our DNA twists all around proteins. These are quick. Your book, whenever these, I think we're going to roll through them really fast. Proteins are bonded by peptide bonds. You got your sequence of amino acids in a protein and is defined by the gene that coded for it. So your proteins are created based on what your genes are saying, and that's in your little DNA codons, right? And there are 20 standard, right? The genetic code specifies 20 standard amino acids, and they are put together. It's like having 20 types of Legos and putting them together many different ways. Not infinite, but a lot, right? And then they can work together, form, function. They build everything. They build your skin, they build your cells, your neurons. Without the proteins, you wouldn't have the neurons created that move electrical signals throughout your body. It all comes down to these guys when it's structure. So we call these macromolecules because they're huge and they are essential, which we said. We're just going to breeze through these really quick. So many proteins are enzymes that catalyze reactions. So today we had an enzyme in lab. It was catalase, right? So the protein in the liver, it's not the only protein in that liver, but there was catalase in that liver, which caused the hydrogen peroxide to break down more quickly than it typically would. Lowers what we call the activation energy, starts the reaction process. So other proteins have structural and mechanical functions. So if they're not enzymes, then they are involved in the structural stuff. Cytoskeleton, the whole scaffolding within your cells that helps them keep their shape. All of this is proteins. And then you also have them involved, like I said, in immune response, keeping your cells stuck together, telling your cells when to reproduce, when to die, super involved in everything. And it's necessary in our diet because you can't make your own amino acids. Some you can, some you cannot make. You have to get those amino acids from an external source, and then your body will use them to create whatever proteins are necessary. So for people that are vegetarian, for example, if you're not going to get your protein from meat, you can get it from what? What are some other protein sources? Beans. Yeah. What else?
I'm vegetarian, so there's like, you can have impossible burgers.
Yeah.
Straight from plants.
Do you know what's in them?
It's, I actually don't know off the top of
I
my
think soy and yes.
There's a lot of soybeans.
Soybeans are very high in protein. So there's lots of ways to get protein in your body to create the same tissues that are essentially like, okay, your muscles are the same thing as a steak. You're just a human steak. All right. So if you eat a steak, you're going to take those same proteins that make steak. A lot of them are going to be identical. All right. You're going to break them down into amino acids. When you eat them, you're going to restructure them and you're going to build human steak. But you can also get them from tofu or he's okay. Tofu, beans. He's fine. I got put all those things. So as long as you get them into your body, you can still build your human steak. They don't have to come from steak, but you can't create them on your own. Oh, I did not click you. Whoops. And this is talking about breaking them down, right? You break your proteins down into amino acids. So we had our reaction today with our enzyme. And if you aren't familiar with chemical reactions, we will have some later this year when we get, he's like, we did these for a whole year. We'll have some later when we get talking about cellular functions. And these little guys are called subscripts. These guys are called coefficients. Together, it's called a formula, right? We'll get to them when we get to them. We'll cover them. So enzymes are catalysts that occur in nature. There are enzymes that don't occur in nature that we just call enzymes. They're like, lab enzymes or whatever. Catalysts lower activation energy. So you need this much energy. You've seen this before, right? Here's a little, you need this much energy to start the reaction. This much energy to start the reaction, but when you add an enzyme, you only need this much and the reaction goes on. That's why we use them. If you didn't have enzymes in your body, you would not survive. It would take so long for all of the reactions in your body to occur that you just wouldn't function. It's not possible. They're essential. So here's what I need you guys to do. I'm going to give you a couple minutes here and we're going to write down, I'm going to make sure you write down, these are the topics for your Unit 1 test. When you do your Unit 1 test, it's going to be through your Teacheries portal. It's mostly multiple choice, some of it's short answer. Now, what will happen is there will inevitably be something where you have to answer by writing, typing in something like my short answer, my fill in the blank, or my little essay or whatever. When you do that, it's probably going to tell you you're wrong. It's going to tell you you're wrong because I have to put in the answers that are right. And if it's one answer, like a fill in the blank, this is the only word that can go here, then that's pretty easy, unless y'all spelled it wrong, in which case I'll check it. But if you're writing me, give me 2 examples of enzymes, okay, I cannot put down everything you would possibly come up with. I can't. So it's going to tell you you're wrong, and it's going to say it has to be manually graded. That, of course. So I have to come back and I have to check it off. So when you see that and it says you're wrong, that's not your grade. Your grade isn't final till I've gone back and checked it, right? And you'll get something that says, oh, ta-da, you're done. Yay, you got a grade. So if you completed, for example, the download, upload assignment, if you completed that, the pre-lesson one, then as of last night, I think, I had sent back all the ones that I had gotten. I'd sent it back to you. So if you've had it sent back to you, you know what that looks like. You get like a response from me and says, here's your grade. So you guys will need to know your 3 types of variables. Don't just be able to say what they are, be able to know what the difference between them is, right? And I'm going to leave this up for a little bit so you have time to copy it. And I'm also going to send this out as a JPEG this afternoon when I send my weekly email. You're going to want to know your different categories of science. So this was in your pre-lesson. If you don't already know it, it was in your pre-lesson, but it talked about how there are two main categories of science. We have our natural sciences, and then what? Does anybody remember?
Formal science.
There you go, formal sciences. And the formal sciences are about certainty. That's math, logic, statistics. It's your natural sciences that are about narrowing uncertainty. Everything else that you think of as science is natural science. Chemistry, physics, archaeology, all that. You're going to need to tell me what a hypothesis is. Be sure that you understand that it's, it's a prediction or it's a guess, that it has to be testable and what? Testable and repeatable. Testable and repeatable. And it's either accepted or rejected. Yes, you're right. Metric conversions. All right, understand what they are. Again, that's in your pre-lesson if it's not something you already know back and forth. But no. Yes.
Those ones.
King Henry died. Yes, this is the one. Those are the ones. Know what they are. Now, if you've not worked with them before, has anybody not worked with metric at all before or much before? No, y'all have good, because we do them a lot in science, and it's still hard for me, even after, dare I say, 45 years on this planet, to visualize some of it, like to see what it would look. What does 23 centimeters look like? But it's so much easier to work with. So much easier to work with. The one that's hardest for me is temperature. I have a real hard time trying to get that in my head. I can visualize 23 centimeters, and I can visualize, I can imagine a kilogram, whatever. But if you say it's 43 degrees Celsius today, I'm like, I don't know what that is. I have to look that up. I cannot get that in my head. I don't know why. And scientific method, understand what it is, what the purpose of it is. Why do we do it? Controlled experiments. Understand what they are, why we do them. Now, theory versus law. This will be the first time this shows up on a test. It will not be the last time. It will show up every midterm and every final exam you ever get from me, as long as you know me, because this will be nailed into your head. There's another one. What's the other one that gets nailed into your head?
Avogadro's number.
Avogadro's number? No. What was it?
Science is never settled.
Science is never settled. Jack has it. Science is never settled will be nailed into your head too. Because that is, not only is it a hugely important concept, but it's a personal pet peeve of mine. Because you'll hear it a lot. You'll hear it a lot, especially with things that are politically driven that are science. You'll hear it incessantly. Never settled. By the way, everybody who is like, what's wrong with the CDC? They said wear a mask, then they said don't wear a mask, then they said, well, they don't know anything. No, that's not how it works. Science works by taking the data you have now and applying it. It doesn't mean you make a decision and then that's the decision forever. If that were the case, we would still think we are the center of the universe and the sun revolves around us.
And that the world is flat.
Yes, all of the above. That's not how it works, right? So understand observations and inferences. All right. An observation versus an inference. Can somebody give me an example of an observation versus an inference?
That is blue.
That's an observation. What could you infer about it then?
It absorbs all light except for blue light.
That's a good one. How about if I said, there's a lot of turquoise in this room, or that's a subjective observation because I said a lot. But if I said there are 24 turquoise items in this room, then what could you infer about that?
That the decorator likes turquoise.
That the decorator liked turquoise. That's right. Oh, Miss Danny must kind of like the way that looks in this room. There you go.
Is the fish okay?
Yeah, he just likes hanging out. That's Bunsen. He likes hanging out at the top. So sexual versus asexual reproduction. This was really quickly, I think, in your chapter, but basically this is a concept that's going to be quick for you guys. Asexual reproduction is going to make essentially a clone, right? You're going to reproduce without mixing any genetic material, which means offspring are going to be genetically identical to the parent.
Which
Whereas
also makes them very weak to viruses.
it can, absolutely. And asexual reproduction is when you are mixing DNA, so you're getting different combinations every time, which causes variety, biodiversity within your species, which, yes, can make for a stronger species overall. More diversity in general.
Other way around, right? You said asexual.
Yeah, you misspoke.
Oh, I misspoke, sorry. Yeah, so yes, sexual reproduction allows for better biodiversity, and more biodiversity is always beneficial for survival, because your environment is going to change. And if your environment changes at all, you're going to have certain members of your particular species that are a better fit just based on their genetic makeup. And those guys will be able to survive and your species will carry on, versus if you were all identical and something hits, then you might just all die, right?
You'll either all die or all survive.
Mm-hmm. But this is useful when you think about bacteria, for example. Your bacteria, if they're all genetically identical because they all reproduce asexually, which a lot of them do, then if you get strep, all right, and you're full of bacteria, strep bacteria, you don't have to have a different antibiotic for every single bacterial cell, do you? You just take one and they all die, right? So it's advantageous in that case. Homeostasis, again, is about your balance. It's about your equilibrium. It's about everything kind of wanting to live in a state of balance. Don't we all want to live balanced, in harmony? We don't all want to be crazy, right? Nobody wants to be like, oh, there's salt over here and not over there. I'm a slug and I'm going to die. And poor slugs, terrible poor slugs. Compounds, two different elements combined together. There's a number of ways in which they can combine, but they make a compound. Mixtures and solutions. Again, this was a super quick one. Mixtures and solutions. What's the difference? A solution's a type of mixture, but what's
Solutions are chemical mixtures.
Solutions
sort of.
are the ones with solvents and solutes.
Solvents and solutes are in solutions, right? You got different kinds of mixtures, right? You've got mixtures that you can pick apart, mixtures that you could shake up and watch them settle, right? And then you've got solutions where something is dissolved in something else, so much so that you can't find individual particles of it by physical means, unless you were to evaporate it, for example.
And which one? And then there's the other one, colloid,
Colloids, where you've got small things within.
which also causes the Tyndale effect.
Yes, Tyndall effect. You remember Tyndall effect? What was Tyndall effect? Do you remember?
Scattering of light, I believe.
Scattering of light. Yes, like milk is a colloid, and if you shine a light through it, it scatters, right? It doesn't just shoot out the other side. Excellent. Enzymes, catalysts in nature. They are proteins. They help lower activation energy, which is necessary for all these biological reactions to take place. Enzyme binding. Okay, look in your chapter for that one. This is a minor one. Make sure you have a brief understanding. And whoop, that's that. We go back one more so you can see it. All right, I'm gonna leave that up for a second. Make sure you get a chance to copy it. And then I have one more quick thing for us to do for the next couple minutes while we're waiting for Spanish to wrap up.
I counted 24 to 46.
24. Good for you. This is weird. I'll tell you why I chose it. Because this light coming in here is turquoise the way it hits the glass. And I thought, oh, that would be a pretty accent color. So then I did it. Because I felt like it. Because I own it, so I can. You know. But I don't want to be like monochromatic crazy. That's too much. All right. Did anybody have trouble with their portal? It seemed like everybody here did fine. Everybody's in, using it. If you have a question about it, tell me. Fastest way to get me is to text me. Slowest way to get me is to email me. So much faster if you just text, but whatever works, works. All right, so we have a few minutes before Spanish wraps up, and we're going to be spending all year together. So I wanted to do a quick round of 2 truths and a lie. So we get to know each other, because we do have some new folks. Okay, everybody shifted, like either they love it or hate it. So I'll give you a minute to think of your 2 truths and a lie. If anybody ever not played this, is anybody who doesn't know how 2 truths and a lie works? So everybody goes around and they give 2 truths about themselves and 1 lie, and then we all try to guess what the lie is. But this is kind of like how you get to know each other, the new people. Take a second, think of your 2 truths and a lie. She's like, I don't know.
Last time I did 2 lies and the truth.
Last time I did
That's
one-
the extreme version,
Last
Shannon.
time I did 1 lie, 1 truth, and forgot my other truth.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I did.
That's what happens a lot. That's why I always need a minute to think about it. So don't mess it up. Oh, let me make sure I have mine too. Okay.
I have 2 truths. I can figure out a lie on this. Like,
Ah, gonna wing it, huh? All right, anybody volunteer to go first? All right, Jack, we'll go clockwise from you. All right, go for it.
That's probably get it over with.
Okay, so tell me who you are first in case I don't know you.
Okay, I am Jack.
Hi, Jack.
Hello.
How old are you? What do you like to do? And then go for it.
Okay, I'm 15.
Unless your 2 truths and a lie reflect on what you like to do. So then don't.
I'm 15. I like a lot of sports. Probably too much.
Jack, what's your list of teams that you root for again?
We won't have time. Let's see. I've driven a race car.
Mm.
Why do I keep forgetting? I literally thought of 3 things.
I thought of 3 things, and now I don't know what they are.
My favorite color is purple.
Okay.
That seems obvious, but
Convincing.
that's okay.
That seems odd. Like,
And